My parents called it independence when they refused to pay for college. So I worked until my hands shook and my heart went quiet. 9 years later, a lawyer called about a family trust I'd never heard of, and an education fund that was supposed to be mine first. Now my career is suddenly under attack, and my father wants to buy my silence. The subject line of the email was innocuous enough. It said, "Important notice regarding the transfer of your student loan servicing." I stared at it on my phone screen, standing in the middle of my kitchen with a half-filled kettle in my hand. I was 31 years old. I had a job title that sounded impressive to people who did not work in finance, a car that started reliably on most mornings, and a credit score that I checked with the same compulsive anxiety that some people checked their Instagram likes. I was an adult. I was safe. I was the independent woman my parents had always claimed they wanted me to be. But that email made my knees lock. I set the kettle down on the counter. Forgetting to turn on the burner, I opened the message. The text was a dense block of corporate indifference, explaining that my federal loans were being moved from one massive, faceless entity to another massive, faceless entity. Buried in the third paragraph was a sentence that made the blood drain from my face. Please note that payment history prior to 2015 may not fully carry over to the new portal. We recommend downloading your full transaction history for your own records before the transition date. May not fully carry over. My history. The evidence of every dollar I had scraped together, every extra payment I had thrown at the principal balance instead of buying groceries. Every month I had managed to keep the wolves at the door. They were telling me it might just vanish into the digital ether. I sat down at my small dining table and opened my laptop. My hands were shaking. It was a physical reaction, a Pavlovian response to the threat of financial erasure. As I logged into the old portal, waiting for the spinning wheel to grant me access to my own life. The smell of the room seemed to change. The scent of my coffee grounds and lemon cleaning spray faded, replaced by the phantom smell of industrial yeast and burnt sugar. I was suddenly back there. I was 18 years old, and I was drowning. It started on a Tuesday in late April. The acceptance letter to Alder Ridge University was sitting on the coffee table in my parents' living room. A heavy cream envelope that I had treated like a holy relic for 3 days. I had done the math. I had the spreadsheets. I knew the tuition was high. But with the financial aid package and the savings account my parents had vaguely alluded to for my entire childhood, it was possible. My father, Grant Hughes, sat in his leather recliner, the one we were not allowed to eat in. My mother, Linda, was on the sofa, folding laundry with precise, snapping motions. "We have discussed it," my father said. He did not look at me. He looked at the television, which was muted, "and we have decided that paying for your college would be a disservice to you." I blinked. I remember laughing, a short, sharp sound, because I thought he was setting up a joke. I waited for the punchline. "Excuse me?" I asked. "You need to be independent." "Alice," my mother said, smoothing a towel on her lap, "the world is a hard place. If we hand this to you, you will never learn the value of a dollar. You need to have skin in the game." I looked from one to the other. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. "But I do not have $50,000 a year," I said. "I have the $3,000 I save from babysitting." "Then you will figure it out," my father said, finally turning to look at me. His face was calm, pleasant even. He looked like a man teaching a toddler how to tie her shoes. "Take out loans. Get a job. This is part of growing up. We are doing this for you." I remember the silence that followed. It was not the silence of contemplation. It was the silence of a trap snapping shut. "But you are paying for Ethan," I said. My voice sounded thin, childish. Ethan was my younger brother, 2 years behind me. You paid for his entire summer trip to Europe. You said it was for his cultural development. That is different. My mother said immediately, "Ethan is taking an exploration year. He needs to find himself. You are going to an institution. You are on a track. You have stability. Ethan needs our support to find his footing." The logic twisted in the air. Impenetrable. My stability was the reason I deserved nothing. Ethan's lack of direction was the reason he deserved everything. I cannot go if you do not help, I said. I will have to decline. My father shrugged. That is your choice. Independence is about choices. Alice. They did not look like monsters. That was the thing that confused me for years. They looked like reasonable, suburban parents. They did not yell. They did not strike me. They simply withdrew the floor from under my feet and told me that falling was a lesson in gravity. I did not decline the acceptance. I went to Alder Ridge, and I learned the lesson they wanted to teach me, though I do not think it was the one they intended. My life became a blur of gray exhaustion. By my sophomore year, my schedule was a physical assault on my body. I woke up at 3:30 in the morning. I did not use a snooze button because I could not afford the luxury of 5 more minutes. I rolled out of my twin bed in the dorms, careful not to wake my roommate, and dressed in the dark. I worked at a bakery 4 miles from campus. I walked the first mile to catch the earliest bus, shivering in the pre-dawn chill. The bakery was a production facility, not a cute storefront. It was hot, loud, and smelled of yeast and desperation. My job was to haul 50-pound bags of flour and scrub the industrial mixers. I worked from 4:30 until 11. Then I took the bus back to campus, changing my clothes in a public restroom because I smelled like sourdough and sweat. I had classes from noon until 4. I sat in lecture halls with 300 other students, fighting to keep my eyelids open, taking notes with a hand that cramped from gripping a scrub brush for 6 hours, from 5 to 9. I worked at the campus tutoring center. I taught statistics and English composition to freshmen who complained that their parents were annoying them with too many care packages. I nodded and smiled and told them how to calculate a standard deviation. I usually ate my first real meal of the day at 10 o'clock at night. I hid it. That was the most important part. I hid the exhaustion like a shameful secret. When my friends asked why I could not go to the movies or come out for drinks on Thursday night, I did not say. I am working 3 jobs to avoid defaulting on a loan that is accruing 6% interest while I sleep. I said, I am just really focused on my studies right now. I am a bit of a nerd. I wanted them to think I was boring. Being boring was better than being poor. Being poor at a private university was a social disease. I remember one afternoon in the financial aid office, I had gone there because the scholarship counselor, a kind woman named Mrs. Halloway, who had pictures of her grandchildren on her desk, had suggested I appeal for emergency aid. You are working too many hours. Alice, she had said, looking at my pay stubs, your grades are slipping because you are not sleeping. We have a grant for students in severe financial distress, but I need your parents' tax returns to process the application. I sat in the plastic chair in her office, clutching my backpack. I called my mother right there. Mom, I said, I need you to send a copy of your tax return to the financial aid office. I can get a grant. It would mean I could drop the bakery shifts. I heard my mother sigh on the other end of the line. It was a long, beleaguered sigh, the sound of a woman being asked to carry a burden she had already put down. Alice, we have discussed this, she said. We are not involved in your financing. That is your responsibility. It is just a form. Mom. I said, I am not asking for money. I am asking for a piece of paper that says you are not paying for my college, because the school assumes you are contributing $20,000 a year. That is my expected family contribution. But you are contributing 0. I just need to prove that. If we sign those forms, we become entangled, she said. And frankly, it feels invasive. Our finances are private. You are an adult. You need to stop looking for shortcuts. It is not a shortcut, I whispered, turning away from Mrs. Halloway so she would not see the tears pricking my eyes. It is a lifeline. No, Alice, my mother said. Her voice was firm. Figure it out. I hung up. I looked at Mrs. Halloway. I lied. They are out of the country. I said, they cannot get the documents to me in time. Mrs. Halloway looked at me over her glasses. She knew. I saw it in her eyes. She knew exactly what was happening, because she had seen it before, but she was bound by the bureaucracy of the institution. Without the parental signature, I was a dependent student, without the tax returns. I had no demonstrated need. I was trapped in a dead end, categorized as a child of wealth who was simply choosing to be difficult. "I am sorry, Alice," she said, "without the paperwork. My hands are tied." I walked out of that office and went straight to the bakery for an extra shift. I cried while I was hosing down the floor drains, the water masking the sound of my sobbing. The next semester, I got what I thought was a break. I saw a flyer for a work-study position at a nonprofit called the Brightwell Youth Initiative. It was in my field. It was prestigious. The flyer said, "Gain real-world experience in advocacy." I interviewed with the director, a charismatic woman who wore silk scarves and spoke passionately about community empowerment. She offered me the job on the spot. "We are so excited to have you, Alice," she said. "Your drive is incredible." I was thrilled. I quit the tutoring center. I kept the bakery job. But I thought this was the beginning of my professional life. On my first day, after I had completed the orientation, I went to the office manager to set up my direct deposit. "Oh," the manager said, looking confused. She was a young woman with a clipboard. "Did the director not tell you? The grant for this position has not cleared yet. This is a volunteer internship until the funding comes through in October." It was August. I felt the blood drain from my face. "But it was listed as work study." I said, "It will be," the manager said brightly. "Retroactively. Once the grant clears, we can process the stipend, but until then, it is technically unpaid. But think of the resume value." I stood there, calculating. I had rent due. I had a textbook to buy that cost $300. I had to eat. I should have walked away. I should have told them that I could not eat resume value. But I was 20 years old, and I was desperate to be something other than a bakery worker. I was desperate to be the professional my parents said I should be. "Okay," I said. "I will make it work." I took the job. I worked 20 hours a week for free, on top of 30 hours at the bakery, on top of a full course load. That was the semester I learned how to starve. It wasn't dramatic starvation. It was the slow, quiet erosion of standards. It was choosing the cheapest caloric density: rice, beans, peanut butter eaten from the jar with a spoon because bread was an extra $3. I lived in an off-campus apartment with 2 roommates to save money. One night, I was in the kitchen, boiling a pot of white rice. That was it. Just rice. I didn't have butter. I didn't have soy sauce. I had a shaker of salt that I had stolen from the campus dining hall. My roommate, Sarah, walked in. She was a nice girl, an art history major whose parents paid her rent and sent her a stipend for groceries. She was holding a bag of takeout from the Thai place down the street. The smell of coconut curry and basil filled the tiny kitchen, and my stomach contracted so violently it hurt. "Is that just rice?" Sarah asked. Looking at my bowl, I laughed. It was a practice laugh, bright and fake. "Yeah," I said. "My stomach has been super weird lately. I think I ate something bad. I'm just doing a brat diet thing for a few days. You know?" "Oh, that sucks," she said, opening her takeout container. "Well, feel better." She went to her room. I stood in the kitchen, spooning the salted plain rice into my mouth, chewing quickly so I wouldn't taste the blandness. 2 hours later, I was in the library, trying to study for a chemistry lab. I had received an email that afternoon telling me I had not paid the lab fee. It was $150. If I did not pay it by Friday, I would be dropped from the course. I had $40 in my bank account. I needed groceries. I had run out of peanut butter. I had 3 days until my bakery paycheck, which would be entirely consumed by rent. I packed up my books and walked to the stairwell of the library. It was a concrete fire escape that nobody used. I sat down on the cold step, put my head between my knees, and I fell apart. I didn't cry because I was sad. I cried because I was exhausted. I cried because the math didn't work. No matter how hard I worked, no matter how little I slept, the numbers remained red. I was running a race where the finish line moved backward every time I took a step. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I wiped my face on my sleeve and pulled it out. thinking it might be the bakery manager asking me to cover a shift. It was an email from my father. The subject line was, "Tough love builds character." I stared at it. My thumb hovered over the screen. I opened it. "Alice, I read this article in the Wall Street Journal this morning and thought of you. It outlines the psychology of self-made success. The author argues that struggle is the crucible of character. We are so proud that you are forging your own path. Remember, the easy road leads to a weak will. Love, Dad." Attached was a link to an opinion piece written by a man who had inherited a shipping company. I sat there in the stairwell, the light of the phone screen illuminating the concrete dust on the floor. I read the email again, crucible of character. He had no idea. He had absolutely no idea. He thought I was sitting in a dorm room, perhaps budgeting carefully, perhaps skipping a party to study. He did not know I was eating plain rice. He did not know I was sleeping 4 hours a night. He did not know I was currently debating whether to drop a required class because I could not afford the fee to mix chemicals in a beaker. And he did not know because he did not ask. He sent articles. He sent philosophy. He did not send money, and he did not send questions. I felt a sudden, hot flash of rage. It was different from the despair I had felt minutes ago. This was cleaner, sharper. I stood up. I deleted the email without replying. I did not go home often. The gas money was hard to justify, and the emotional toll was higher. But 3 months later, in late October, my aunt was visiting from Florida, and my mother insisted I come for the weekend. "We are having a family dinner." She said on the phone, "It would look strange if you were not there. Alice, it would look strange. Not we miss you. Not we want to see you." It was about optics. I drove my beat-up Honda Civic the 2 hours home. The car had a shudder when it went over 60 miles an hour. A constant reminder that a mechanic's bill was a disaster I could not afford. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed the house looked different. The landscaping was new, fresh mulch, perfectly trimmed hedges. I walked inside. My mother greeted me with a hug that felt stiff. "You look tired," she said, pulling back and scanning my face. "You have circles under your eyes. Are you drinking enough water? I am working 2 jobs and taking 18 credits. "Mom," I said. She waved her hand dismissively. "Well, come see the kitchen." We finally finished the renovation. I followed her into the kitchen. I stopped in the doorway. It was unrecognizable. The old laminate countertops were gone, replaced by slabs of gleaming, veined granite. The cabinets were custom cherry wood. The appliances were stainless steel, massive and professional grade. There was a wine fridge built into the island. "It is beautiful," I said. My voice felt hollow. "Right?" my father said, walking in from the backyard. He was holding a glass of scotch. "And look at the patio." I looked through the new sliding glass doors. The old wooden deck was gone. In its place was a sprawling stone patio with an outdoor fireplace. There was a set of teak furniture with plush, cream-colored cushions. It must have cost a fortune. I said. The words slipped out before I could stop them. My mother stiffened. It was a necessary investment. "Alice," she said, "the house value will go up significantly. It is about equity." "And college?" I asked. I turned to look at her. "College is not an investment?" My father swirled his drink. "College is a choice," he said calmly. "You chose a private university. You chose your path. This is our home. We have worked hard for this." I looked at the granite countertop. I ran my hand along the cool, hard edge. I thought about the $150 lab fee. I thought about the rice. I thought about Mrs. Halloway and the tax returns they refused to sign. They had the money. It wasn't that they couldn't help. It was that they wouldn't. The realization settled over me like a heavy blanket. All the lectures about independence, all the emails about character, all the moral posturing. It was a lie. It wasn't a principle. It was a preference. They preferred new countertops to my education. They preferred a wine fridge to my safety. I got through the dinner. I smiled at my aunt. I listened to my brother, Ethan, talk about his trip to Barcelona, which my parents had funded because it was cultural. I ate the roast beef and the garlic mashed potatoes, and I felt like a spy in enemy territory. When I drove back to campus on Sunday night, the highway was dark. The heater in my car rattled. I made a decision somewhere between mile marker 40 and 41. I was done. I would not ask them for help again, not for a tax return, not for a cosigner, not for $10. But the price of that independence was going to be my intimacy. They wanted me to be independent? Fine, I would be independent. I would build a wall so high and so thick that they would never see over it. They would get the updates I chose to give them. They would get the polite, hollow daughter they had paid for. They would never know about the panic attacks. They would never know about the hunger. They would never know who I really was. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. "You win," I whispered to the empty car. "I am independent." I didn't know then that independence was just the first layer of the trap. I didn't know about the trust. I didn't know about the consulting firm. I didn't know that while I was counting pennies for rice, they were moving thousands of dollars in my name. All I knew was that I was alone, and I swore I would never let them hurt me again. I snapped back to the present. The kettle was whistling. The sound pierced the kitchen of my 31-year-old life. I looked down at the laptop screen, at the warning about the loan history may not fully carry over. I reached for my phone and dialed the number for the loan servicer. I needed every single record. I needed every statement from 2012, every proof of payment, every evidence of the struggle. Because if I had learned anything from Grant and Linda Hughes, it was this: if you do not have it in writing, it did not happen. And if you are not careful, the people who claim to love you will erase you to save themselves. I waited on hold, listening to the tinny jazz music, and I prepared for war. Graduation was not a ceremony of triumph. It was an exhale. It was the sound of a heavy door clicking shut behind me. There were no family photos on the lawn, no celebratory dinner at a steakhouse where a father clinked a glass and made a speech about bright futures. I collected my diploma from the registrar's office on a rainy Tuesday, 2 weeks after the actual ceremony. Because I had been working a double shift on commencement day, I drove out of the college town with my belongings packed into the back seat of my Honda Civic, the suspension groaning under the weight of textbooks I could not sell back and clothes that had been washed too many times. I was heading to West Harbor. It was a city that existed in the middle distance, neither a metropolis nor a small town, a place of concrete overpasses and office parks clad in reflective glass. I had landed a job as a junior accounts receivable analyst at a medical billing company. The title was a mouthful of corporate syllables that meant I spent 8 hours a day arguing with insurance companies about why a specific code for a knee brace had been rejected. The office was a sprawling floor of gray cubicles under fluorescent lights that hummed with a sound like a trapped insect. The carpet was the color of old oatmeal, and the break room smelled perpetually of burnt popcorn and apathy. But the paycheck cleared. Every 2 weeks, on Friday morning, $1,700 appeared in my bank account. It was the most money I had ever seen. It was steady. It was boring. It was beautiful. I rented a studio apartment in a complex called The Pines. Though the only tree on the property was a sickly maple near the dumpster, the apartment was 400 square feet of beige linoleum and off-white walls. My bed took up most of the living space. I had a table, 2 chairs, and a window that looked out onto the parking lot. I loved it. I loved it with a fierce, possessive intensity that frightened me. I loved that the milk in the refrigerator was mine and would not be drunk by a roommate. I loved that the electricity bill had my name on it. I loved that when I locked the deadbolt at night, nobody could come in unless I let them. I built a cathedral of control in that apartment. Its altar was my laptop, open to a spreadsheet named Master Budget. I tracked every cent. I mean that literally. I had columns for rent, utilities, insurance, gas, groceries, and debt repayment. I had a column for miscellaneous, which was capped strictly at $20 a month. If I bought a pack of gum, it went into the spreadsheet. If I found a quarter on the sidewalk, I logged it as income. On Sunday nights, I would sit with a cup of tea and reconcile my accounts. Seeing the numbers line up gave me a rush of dopamine that was almost narcotic. It made me feel safe. It made me feel like I had built a fortress that nothing could penetrate. But safety is a claustrophobic feeling when it is built on fear. I was not saving for a vacation. I was saving because I knew, with the certainty of a survivor, that the floor could drop out at any moment. I was trapped by my own vigilance. I could not buy a $6 sandwich without calculating how many minutes of work it represented. I could not drive to the beach because the gas money was better spent on the principal of my smallest loan. My car, the faithful, rusting Civic, became the physical manifestation of my anxiety. It had developed a habit of stalling at red lights. The engine would just cut out, dying into a silent shudder. I would have to shift into park, turn the key, and pray. It always restarted. But the 3 seconds of silence were terrifying. I imagined the tow truck. I imagined the mechanic's bill. I imagined the spreadsheet turning red. And then, the system glitched. It was 6 months into my new life in West Harbor. I received a letter from my student loan servicer, the new one, the one that had taken over my accounts. I opened it standing by my mailbox, the wind whipping my hair across my face. Notice of payment adjustment, it said. I scanned the document. My monthly minimum payment had jumped by $240. I felt the blood drain from my head. $240 was my grocery budget for the entire month. It was my gas money. It was the difference between solvency and drowning. I ran upstairs and called the customer service line. I spent 45 minutes on hold, pacing the 12 feet between my bed and my kitchenette. Finally, a representative named David came on the line. He sounded bored. "I see the issue. Ma'am," he said, "it looks like one of your semesters from junior year was reclassified as partial enrollment." "Partial enrollment?" I said. My voice was high and tight. I was never partial enrollment. I took 18 credits that semester. I was overloaded. "Well, the records we received show you dropped below 12 credits," David said. That triggered a change in the loan terms for that disbursement. The grace period was retroactively canceled, and the interest capitalized. "That is a mistake," I said. "I was working full-time and taking classes. I never dropped a class. I failed one, maybe, but I never dropped it. If you want to contest it," David said, "we need proof. We need a certified transcript from the university for that specific semester. And we need a signed affidavit from the registrar confirming your full-time status." "Fine," I said. "I will get it." I hung up and called Alder Ridge University. The registrar's office told me that to release a certified transcript with a specific status verification, I needed to fill out a request form, and because the semester in question was 3 years ago, they needed to verify my identity with documents from that time period. Specifically, they needed the tax forms I had used to file my FAFSA that year. I froze. I did not have those forms. My parents had them. Even though they hadn't paid a dime, their information had been required for the filing because I was under 24. I had never seen the actual documents. My mother had just inputted the numbers into the online form for me one afternoon while complaining about how complicated it was. I stared at my phone. I had to call them. I dialed the landline. It rang 4 times before my mother picked up. "Hello? Hi, Mom," I said. "It is Alice." "Alice," she said. Her voice was bright, airy. "We were just talking about you. Your father saw a girl at the hardware store who looked just like you. Except she had blonde hair. That is nice." I said, "Mom, I need a favor. It is important." There was a tiny pause. The brightness dimmed by a fraction. "Oh? What is it?" "I need a copy of your tax return from 4 years ago." I said, "Just the first 2 pages. There is an error with my student loans, and the school needs to verify the info to fix it. If they do not fix it, my payment goes up by $200 a month." I heard her sigh. It was the same sigh she used when the dog tracked mud onto the carpet. "Alice, those are in the attic somewhere," she said. "I mean, they are boxed up deep. We have archived everything prior to 2 years ago. Mom, please." I said, "I really need this. I cannot afford the higher payment. It is a mistake. I just need you to scan them and email them to me." "Well, I cannot do it today," she said. "I have the garden club meeting in an hour, and I promised Linda Miller I would bring my ambrosia salad. I have not even started chopping the fruit." "Okay," I said, gripping the phone. Can you do it tomorrow? I will try, she said. But you know how busy your father is with the consulting work, and I have that dentist appointment. Please, Mom, just write it down. I will. I will. Do not panic. Alice. It is not life or death. She hung up. I waited 2 days. Nothing. I called back. Oh, Alice, she said. I completely forgot. I went up to the attic, but I got distracted looking at your old baby clothes. Did you know we still have that little sailor dress? Mom, the taxes? Right, right. I will look for them this weekend. Your father has to move the boxes, and his back has been acting up. I waited another 3 days. The due date for the loan payment was approaching. I sent an email. I sent a text. Finally, a week later, I got a text back. Couldn't find the specific box. We'll keep looking when we do the spring cleaning next month. Sorry, next month. I sat on the edge of my bed. I looked at the spreadsheet. I had to pay the higher amount. If I didn't, I would be delinquent. Late fees would apply. My credit score, the golden calf I worshipped, would take a hit. I transferred the money. I canceled my internet service to make up the difference. For the next 3 weeks, I used the free Wi-Fi at the public library, sitting in my car in the parking lot after the building closed so I could pay my bills. They couldn't find it. They just hadn't looked. It wasn't malice. I told myself, it was just that my emergency was their inconvenience, and in the hierarchy of the Hughes family, their comfort always outranked my survival. It was around this time that I met Jonah. I was at the library, actually inside this time, trying to print a shipping label for a pair of shoes I was selling on eBay to make extra cash. The printer was jammed. I was standing there, pressing buttons with increasing force, feeling the heat rise in my face. Here, a voice said, you have to lift the tray, not pull it. I turned around. A man was standing there. He was wearing a corduroy jacket with patches on the elbows that looked unironic. He had messy dark hair and eyes that looked tired but kind. He reached past me, lifted the tray, and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. The machine whirred back to life. Thanks, I said, stepping back. I usually have a better relationship with technology. He smiled. It was a slow, easy smile. I am Jonah. I practically live at this printer. I am a social worker. The amount of paperwork I have to print is responsible for half the deforestation in the Amazon. I am Alice. I said, I work in medical billing. I think I'm responsible for the other half. He laughed. Do you want to get a coffee? The machine in the lobby is terrible. But it is hot. I hesitated. Coffee cost money, even terrible lobby coffee. My treat, he added, as if reading my mind. We sat on a bench outside the library. The air was crisp, smelling of autumn leaves and car exhaust. Jonah Mercer was 33. He worked with at-risk youth. He spoke about his job with a mixture of weary realism and stubborn hope that I found baffling. He didn't seem to care about money, which made me suspicious. He was drawn to me, I think, because I seemed put together. He liked that I was organized. He liked that I had a plan. He told me on our second date that he admired my discipline. You are like a machine, he said, watching me organize the condiments on the table at the diner. Everything has a place with you. If only he knew the machine was running on fumes. We started seeing each other. It was slow. I was cautious. I didn't bring him to my apartment for a month because I was ashamed of how empty it was. When I finally did, he didn't mention the lack of furniture. He just sat on one of my 2 kitchen chairs and asked me about the books I had stacked on the floor. But he noticed things. He was a social worker. It was his job to notice things. He noticed that I never ordered a drink with dinner. He noticed that I parked 3 blocks away to avoid the valet fee. And he noticed the flinch. We were walking past a furniture store downtown, and he stopped to look at a leather armchair in the window. That would look great in my living room. He said, maybe I should splurge. It is $2,000. I physically recoiled. My stomach tightened, and my breath hitched. $2,000 for a chair? It was obscene. It was dangerous. Alice, he said, looking at me. You okay? I forced a smile. Yeah, that is a lot of money. It is. He agreed, but I have been saving for it. Saving for a chair. not saving for a disaster, saving for a chair. He watched me for a second too long. His eyes did a quick inventory of my face, reading the panic I was trying to hide. He didn't say anything, but he took my hand and squeezed it. I didn't squeeze back. A week later, my brother Ethan called me. I was in the middle of my Sunday budget reconciliation. I put the phone on speaker so I could keep typing. "Hey, Alice," Ethan said. He sounded breathless, like he was walking fast. "Guess what? You got a job?" I asked. "No, better. I am switching majors. I am dropping business. It is just too soul-sucking, you know? Everyone is so obsessed with profit. I'm going into environmental design. I want to build sustainable eco-villages." I stopped typing. Ethan was a senior. This would add at least 3 semesters to his degree. "Ethan," I said carefully, "that is going to take a lot of extra time. How are you paying for that?" "Oh, Mom and Dad are cool with it," he said. "They said it is important to be passionate about what you do. They are helping out a little with the extra tuition. They said it is an investment in my future happiness." Helping out a little. I stared at the column in my spreadsheet labeled student loan interest. The number was 4 digits long. "That is nice," I heard myself say. My voice sounded like it was coming from a radio in another room. "That is really great for you." "Ethan, yeah, I am super excited," he said. "Anyway, I have to go. I am meeting some people for sushi. Talk later." The line went dead. I sat in my chair. I felt hollowed out. It wasn't jealousy, exactly. It was the injustice of the physics. We were in the same universe, born of the same parents. Yet gravity worked differently for him. He floated, I fell. Helping out a little meant they were writing checks. It meant they were doing exactly what they had told me they could not, would not do. The principle of independence was apparently a bespoke lesson, tailored exclusively for me. I closed the laptop. I didn't cry. I didn't have the energy to cry. I just went to the sink and washed my single teacup, drying it until the ceramic was hot from friction. I decided I needed to advance. I needed to make more money so that their choices stopped mattering. My employer, Northbridge Claims, had a program listed in the employee handbook, Professional Development Assistance. They offered tuition reimbursement for certifications relevant to the role. I found a certification program, Certified Healthcare Financial Professional. It cost $3,000. It would take 6 months. If I got it, I would be eligible for a promotion to senior analyst, which came with a $10,000 raise. I went to my manager, a man named Gary who wore short-sleeved dress shirts. "I want to do this," I said, handing him the brochure. Gary nodded, looking at his phone. Sure. Great initiative. Alice, fill out the forms. We will reimburse you upon completion with a passing grade." I filled out the forms. I got the approval signature. I put the $3,000 on a credit card. It was a terrifying amount of debt. But I told myself it was an investment. I was betting on myself. I started the classes. They were online, rigorous, and boring. I studied every night from 7 to 10. 2 months in. I was in the break room getting coffee when I heard Gary talking to the HR director. "Yeah, corporate is slashing the L&D budget for Q3, the HR director said. "We have to scrap the reimbursement program effective immediately." "But what about the people already enrolled?" Gary asked. "Clause 4.2, she said. "The company reserves the right to terminate the program at any time due to fiscal constraints. Just send out a memo." I walked out of the break room. I went to my desk. I pulled up the employee handbook, Clause 4.2. There it was. I was on the hook for $3,000. The reimbursement was gone. I walked into the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and breathed in for 4 counts, held for 4, out for 4. I could drop the course. If I dropped it now, I could get a 50% refund. I would lose $1,500, but I would stop the bleeding. I thought about my parents. I thought about the necessary investment of the kitchen renovation. I thought about Ethan's sustainable eco-villages. No, I was not going to quit. I was not going to let a corporation or a budget cut or a family philosophy stop me. I would finish the damn course. I would get the letters after my name, and I would pay for it myself. just like I paid for everything else. I got a second job. I found a listing for a data entry clerk at a logistics firm that operated on a night shift. It was remote work. I could do it from home. My life became a blur of keystrokes. I worked at Northbridge from 8 to 5. I came home, ate a sandwich, and studied for my certification from 6 to 9. Then, from 9:30 to 1 in the morning, I logged into the logistics portal and typed shipping manifests. I slept 5 hours. I stopped seeing my friends. I saw Jonah once a week for a quick dinner, during which I usually fell asleep on his shoulder. "Alice, this is not sustainable," Jonah told me one night, smoothing my hair as I jerked awake on his couch. "You are running yourself into the ground. I have to finish." I mumbled, "I have to pay the card off." "Why?" he asked gently. "Why is it always an emergency with you?" "Because nobody is coming to save me." I said. The words tumbled out before I could filter them. He looked at me with that sad, knowing expression. "I am here," he said. I pulled away. "You are here now." I thought, "But you have boundaries. Everyone has boundaries. And sooner or later, I will cross one, and I will be alone again." I finished the certification. I passed the exam with a 98% score. I got the promotion. The raise was barely enough to cover the interest on the debt I had incurred to get it, but I had done it. I had carved another inch of ground out of the rock. A month later, my parents invited me to a celebratory dinner, not for my promotion, for Ethan. He had finished his first semester of the new major with a B average. We met at a nice Italian restaurant in West Harbor, halfway between my parents' house and the city. My father ordered a bottle of red wine that cost more than my weekly car payment. He poured a glass for Ethan, then one for me. "Here is to Ethan," my father said, raising his glass. "For finding his true north, you know. Son, you have always been a natural leader. You have the vision." Ethan beamed. "Thanks, Dad. It really feels right this time." My mother nodded. Tearing a piece of focaccia, "It is so important to support that kind of spirit. We are just so happy we could facilitate this transition for you." I sat there, gripping the stem of my wine glass. I looked at my father. "And Alice," he said, turning to me. He smiled. It was a benevolent, distant smile. "We are proud of you too. Honey, you are just so independent. You always have been. You never needed us the way Ethan does. You are a survivor." He said it like a compliment. He said it like my struggle was a personality quirk, a charming feature of my character. He spoke as if I had come out of the womb refusing help, rather than having learned to survive because they had locked the door. So independent. It wasn't praise, it was an absolution, by labeling me independent. They absolved themselves of the guilt of neglecting me. If I didn't need them, then they hadn't failed me. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted like vinegar. "That is me," I said, "Independent Alice." I drove straight to Jonah's apartment after the dinner. It was raining again. My car stalled at the last light before his street, and I sat there in the dark, listening to the rain hammer the roof, waiting for the engine to catch. When I got to his door, I was soaking wet. He opened it, wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants, looking soft and warm and safe. "Alice?" he said. "What is wrong?" I walked inside and stood in his hallway, dripping water onto his rug. "They think it is a compliment," I said. My voice was shaking. "They think my independence is something I chose." Jonah closed the door and reached for me. But I stepped back. I needed to say it. I needed to say it out loud to someone who wasn't part of the lie. "I don't know how to do this," I said, gesturing at him, at the apartment, at the space between us. "I don't know how to let you be nice to me." "Why?" Jonah asked softly. "Because every time someone helps me, there is a hook," I said, "or there is a trap door, or they just forget. My parents. They look at me and they see a success story. But I am not a success story. I am a scar tissue. I am just a collection of coping mechanisms held together by anxiety." "Alice," Jonah said, stepping forward. He didn't touch me. He just stood close enough that I could feel his heat. You are fighting a war that is over. You are safe here." I looked at him. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to collapse into him and sleep for a week. But the voice in my head, the voice that sounded like my mother's sigh and my father's lectures, whispered that safety was just an illusion before the next bill came due. "I am not fighting because I want to." I whispered, "I am fighting because I don't know who I am without the fight." Jonah took my hand then. His palm was warm, then put down the shield for 5 minutes. He said, "Just 5 minutes." I let him pull me into a hug. I buried my face in his chest. I didn't cry. I just stood there, breathing in the smell of his laundry detergent, feeling the terrible, terrifying weight of someone else's care. I didn't know it then, but the war wasn't over. It hadn't even truly begun. Because the silence from my parents wasn't just neglect, it was a cover-up. And while I was standing there in Jonah's hallway, learning to trust, a lawyer named Mara Vance was sitting in an office 300 miles away, looking at a trust document that would turn my entire history into a crime scene. It had been 9 years since the day in the living room, 9 years since the refusal, 9 years since I had been told that independence was a gift, not a sentence. I sat at my kitchen table, the laptop screen glowing in the dim light of the apartment. My finger hovered over the trackpad. The website for my private student loan servicer, the one with the highest interest rate, the one I called the Viper, showed a remaining balance of $0.00. I clicked the refresh button. It still said 0. I had just transferred the final payment. It was $4,322. It was the entirety of my tax refund, plus 6 months of aggressive, miserable saving. I waited for the confetti. I waited for the digital balloons to float up the screen. I waited for a feeling of euphoria to wash over me, the kind of relief people talk about in inspirational Instagram posts. I felt nothing. Actually, that is not true. I felt tired. I felt the specific, bone-deep exhaustion of a runner who has just finished a marathon, only to realize she has to walk 10 miles home. I still had the federal loans. I still had the car payments. I still had rent. But the Viper was dead. I closed the laptop. I did not call anyone. I did not post a screenshot on social media with a caption about grinding or hustling. I had learned a long time ago not to invite an audience to my financial life. If I posted it, people would congratulate me, and the congratulations would feel like ash, because they did not know the cost. They did not know about the years of skipped dental appointments or the winter I walked to work because I could not afford a new alternator. I ordered takeout from the Thai place down the street. I ordered the pad CU with extra tofu. I ate it straight from the carton, standing at the counter, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. This was what victory looked like for me. Quiet, private, and tasting faintly of soy sauce and solitude. The next morning, the hangover of adrenaline had set in. I was at my desk at Northbridge Claims, staring at a spreadsheet of denied insurance appeals. When my cell phone buzzed, it was a local number I did not recognize. I let it go to voicemail. I never answered unknown numbers. That was how debt collectors found you, even when you were current. 10 minutes later, the voicemail notification popped up. I put in my earbuds and pressed play, expecting a robotic voice telling me my car warranty had expired. "This is a message for Alice Hughes," a woman's voice said. She sounded crisp, professional, like the snap of a file folder. "My name is Mara Vance. I am an attorney with Vance & Associates. I am calling regarding the Hughes Family Living Trust. We have been trying to verify your current mailing address to provide required notice. Please return my call at your earliest convenience." I replayed the message. Hughes Family Living Trust. The words sounded foreign, like a language I had never studied. A trust? A trust was something for people who summered in Cape Cod. A trust was for people who owned horses. A trust was not for the daughter of Grant and Linda Hughes, who had renovated a kitchen while their daughter ate rice. I Googled the number. Vance & Associates. It was a real law firm in my parents' town. Estate planning and asset protection. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, sounding breathless. "Alice, is everything okay?" "I am fine," I said. I sat up straighter in my office chair. Mom, I just got a weird voicemail from a lawyer named Mara Vance. She said she represents the Hughes Family Living Trust. Do you know who that is? There was a pause, a long, staticky silence. Oh, that. My mother said. Her voice dropped into the dismissive register she used for telemarketers and door-to-door evangelists. It is probably spam. Alice, we get those calls all the time. People fishing for information. Just ignore it. She used my name. Mom. I said. She knew who I was. She said she needed to send required notice. It is a scam. Alice. My mother insisted. They buy lists. They buy data. Your father and I have everything handled. Do not call them back. You will just end up on some solicitous list. I hung up. I looked at the phone. My mother was a terrible liar. She was a woman who believed that if she ignored a thing hard enough, it ceased to exist. But her voice had been too high, too quick. I went to my email. I searched for Mara Vance. There was nothing in my inbox. I checked my spam folder. There it was. Subject: Notice of Beneficiary Status. Hughes Family Living Trust. I opened it. Attached was a PDF. I clicked the file. It opened with a slow, digital stutter. Dear Ms. Hughes, pursuant to the terms of the Hughes Family Living Trust, we are providing notice of your status as a contingent beneficiary. Please find the attached summary of trust assets and the current amendment schedule. I scrolled down. My eyes scanned the legal jargon, the density of whereases and herebys, and then I stopped. Date of creation: August 14th, 2012. I did the math. August 2012. I was 18 years old. It was the summer before I started at Alder Ridge. It was the same summer my parents had sat me down in the living room and told me there was no money. It was the same summer they had told me I needed to learn the value of $1. They had created a family trust 3 weeks before I moved into the dorms. I felt a coldness spread from my chest to my fingertips. I called my father. He answered in his business voice. Grant Hughes. Dad. I said, It is Alice. Hey, kiddo, he said. Working hard? I am looking at a document from a lawyer named Mara Vance. I said, I didn't wait for pleasantries. It says there is a Hughes Family Living Trust. It says it was created the year I started college. Silence. Then, a sigh. The heavy, disappointed sigh of a man whose authority is being questioned. Alice, do not get worked up, he said. That is just an estate planning vehicle. It is standard stuff. Standard stuff? I asked. My voice rose. I stood up and walked out of the cubicle farm, heading for the stairwell. You told me there was no money. You told me I had to take out loans because you couldn't afford to help, and at the exact same time, you were setting up a trust? It is for emergencies. Alice, my mother's voice chimed in. She must have been on the extension. We were protecting the family. We have to think about the long term. If something happened to us, we needed to make sure the assets were secure. What assets? I shouted. I was in the stairwell now, the concrete echoing my voice. You acted like we were broke. You let me work 3 jobs. We were cash poor. Alice, my father said, his voice hard. There is a difference between liquidity and equity. You would understand that if you didn't take everything so personally. We locked up the assets to protect them. To protect you. Eventually, to protect me? I laughed. It was a jagged, ugly sound. You protected me by letting me drown in debt? We made you strong, my father said. And look at you. You are independent. You are self-sufficient. If we had given you a handout, you would still be dependent on us. I hung up. I couldn't listen to the script anymore. The word independent tasted like bile. I went back to my desk, but I couldn't work. I sat there, vibrating with rage. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. It was Ethan. I hesitated. Ethan was the golden boy, the one who got the help, the one who floated. But I answered. Alice? He whispered. Ethan? I said. Why are you whispering? I am at work. He said. Look, did you talk to Mom and Dad? Yes. I said. About the trust. Okay. Listen, he said, His voice was shaking. I got a packet too. From the lawyer. Mom and Dad called me last night. They told me I needed to sign something. A waiver for powers of appointment? I don't even know what that means. What did they tell you? I asked. They said it was technical. He said, they said they were moving some properties around and needed my signature to streamline it. But Alice, they told me not to call you. I closed my eyes. Of course they did. Why? I asked. They said, Ethan paused. He sounded miserable. They said not to involve you because you get emotional. They said you wouldn't understand the strategy and you would just get upset about the past. I get emotional. The phrase hit me like a slap. It was their favorite weapon. If I cried because I was hungry, I was emotional. If I panicked about debt, I was emotional. If I questioned their choices, I was hysterical. They used my reaction to their abuse as proof that I was too unstable to be treated like an adult. They are right, I said, my voice deadly calm. I'm getting very emotional. Ethan, did you sign it? No, he said. I told them I needed to read it first. Dad got really mad. He said I was being difficult. Do not sign it. I said, do not sign anything until I see it. I hung up. I went back to the PDF. I started Googling the addresses listed in the schedule of assets. I expected to see their house, maybe the cabin my grandfather left them. I did not expect to see the apartment complex on 4th Street. I did not expect to see a strip mall in the next town over. I did not expect to see a duplex near the university. My university. There were 5 properties. I looked at the street view of the duplex. It was a beige box with a chain-link fence. It was unglamorous. It was ugly. But I knew the rental market in that town. That duplex generated at least $2,000 a month in rent. While I was paying late fees on my library books, they were collecting rent from students just like me. I felt sick. It wasn't just that they had money. It was that they had an entire business I knew nothing about. They had looked me in the eye, wearing their ragged bathrobes, complaining about the cost of heating oil. While they were managing a property portfolio, I left work early. I drove to Jonah's office. He was in the middle of paperwork, but when he saw my face, he put his pen down. What happened? He asked. I told him. I told him about the voicemail, the trust, the rental properties, the phone call. I told him about Ethan and the waiver. Jonah listened. He didn't interrupt. He sat on the edge of his desk, his arms crossed, his expression tightening with every sentence. When I finished, I was pacing the small room, my hands shaking. They lied. I said, they lied for 9 years. They watched me struggle. They watched me eat rice. Jonah. And they were landlords the whole time. Jonah stood up and put his hands on my shoulders. He stopped my pacing. Alice, breathe, he said. I cannot breathe, I snapped. I am angry. I am allowed to be angry. Yes, you are, he said firmly. You are allowed to be furious. But if you want to win this, you cannot be the person they say you are. What? I pulled away. They expect you to blow up, Jonah said. They told Ethan you get emotional. That is their defense mechanism. If you scream, if you yell, they can dismiss you as the crazy daughter. They can say, see, this is why we couldn't trust her with money. I stared at him. He was right. It was a trap. If I reacted with the emotion the situation deserved, I proved their point. So what do? I asked. My voice broke. Do I just take it? No, Jonah said. You do the opposite. You get cold. You get clinical. You gather facts. You treat this like a billing error at work. You don't give them a single inch of emotion to use against you. I looked at him. There was a terrible irony in it. To get justice for the fact that my parents had treated me like a stranger, I had to become one. I had to use the very suppression they had forced on me to dismantle them. Okay, I said. I took a breath. I can do cold. The next day, I took a sick day. I drove 3 hours to my parents' town. I didn't go to their house. I went to the offices of Vance and Associates. It was a brick building with ivy on the walls. It looked respectable. It looked like the kind of place that protected families. I walked in without an appointment. The receptionist looked up, surprised. I am Alice Hughes. I said, I am here to see Mara Vance. I received her notice yesterday. I will see if she is available. The receptionist said, she was. Mara Vance came out 5 minutes later. She was older than she sounded on the phone. A woman in her 50s with sharp glasses and a suit that cost more than my first car. Ms. Hughes, she said, extending a hand. I didn't expect to see you in person. I had some questions that I thought were better asked face to face. I said. She led me into a conference room. It smelled of lemon polish and old paper. We sat at a mahogany table. I have reviewed the summary you sent. I said. I opened my folder. I had printed everything. But I noticed something missing. Oh? Mara asked. She clasped her hands. The trust was created in 2012. I said, that was my freshman year of college. The stated purpose of the trust, according to the preamble, is the health, education, and maintenance of the beneficiaries. That is standard language. Mara said, right. I said, so, if the purpose was education, and the trust held significant assets, why was I told there were no funds available for my tuition? Mara shifted in her chair. She took off her glasses and cleaned them on her scarf. Ms. Hughes, she said carefully, a trustee has broad discretion. The existence of assets does not mandate their distribution. Your parents, as trustees, had the power to decide when and how to disperse funds. I understand discretion. I said, I don't understand deception. I looked at her. I need to see the amendments. I said, all of them. Mara hesitated. She looked at the file in front of her. Then she looked at me. I think she saw something in my face. Maybe the exhaustion. Maybe the resolve. There was an education fund, she said softly. The room went silent. What? I asked. Originally, Mara said, when the trust was drafted in 2012, there was a subtrust designated specifically as the Hughes Children Education Fund. It was funded with the initial transfer of the rental properties. The language was quite specific. It mandated annual distributions for tuition and room and board. I felt the air leave my lungs. It existed. It wasn't just that they had money. They had money earmarked for me. Where is it? I asked. It was dissolved. Mara said. 6 months later, by amendment. Dissolved? Your parents executed a first amendment to the trust in January of 2013. She said, they redirected the assets from the education fund back into the general principle of the trust. They cited, changed circumstances. January 2013. That was the winter I was working the bakery shift. That was the winter I was hiding in the stairwell. They created a fund for my college, and then they deleted it. Why? I whispered. The amendment doesn't state a reason. Mara said, but legally, they had the right to do it. It is a revocable trust. They are the grantors. They can change the rules whenever they want. I sat there, processing the horror of it. It wasn't negligence. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a conscious, administrative action. They had sat in a room, maybe this very room, and signed a piece of paper that took the money away. They had decided, legally and formally, that I should struggle. I want copies. I said, I want a copy of the original trust with the education fund language, and I want a copy of the amendment that dissolved it. Mara nodded slowly. I can provide those, but Ms. Hughes, I should warn you. What? Families often misunderstand what was promised versus what was done, she said. If you challenge this, the trustee can delay. They can make the accounting very difficult, and the emotional toll. I stopped her. I stood up. Ms. Vance, I said, my parents told my brother not to tell me about this because I get emotional. Do I look emotional to you? Mara looked at me. I was standing perfectly still. My hands were flat on the table. My face felt like stone. No, she said. You look very determined. Good, I said. Send me the documents. I walked out of the office. I walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I thought about the timeline. January 2013. I tried to remember what happened that month, and then I remembered. That was the month I had come home for winter break. That was the month I had told them I got straight A's despite working 30 hours a week. That was the month my father had said, "See? You are managing. You are tougher than you think." He had taken my survival as proof that he didn't need to help me. And then he had come to this law office and signed away the help that was already there. I started the car. The story I had told myself for 9 years, that my parents were just selfish, that they were just callous, was wrong. It was too small. This wasn't just unfair. It was engineered. It was a deliberate, documented architecture of cruelty. They hadn't just refused to pay. They had built a legal structure to ensure they didn't have to, and then they had hidden it behind a wall of silence. I put the car in gear. They wanted independent? I thought I would show them exactly what an independent daughter could do. The conference room at Vance & Associates was designed to intimidate. It was a space of mahogany and silence, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the manicured lawn of the office park. I sat on one side of the long table, my hands clasped on top of my binder. I had arrived 20 minutes early. I needed to claim the space. I needed to stop shaking. I felt like I was sitting in court, waiting for a verdict. But there was no judge. There was only Mara Vance, who sat at the head of the table shuffling papers with a rhythmic, dry sound. My parents arrived at exactly 2 o'clock. They walked in as if they were arriving for a Sunday brunch. My mother, Linda, wore a pastel cardigan and carried a designer handbag that I knew cost more than my first 2 cars combined. My father, Grant, was in his golf polo and khakis, projecting an air of relaxed, benevolent authority. Ethan trailed behind them, looking pale and staring at his shoes. "Alice!" my mother exclaimed, coming toward me with her arms open. "We did not know you were coming in person. I thought this was just a paperwork thing." I stood up, but I did not step forward. I stayed behind my chair. I thought it was important to be here. I said, My mother stopped. Her arms dropped. She gave a small, confused laugh, glancing at Mara. "Well, okay," she said. "It is always nice to see you. Honey, even if you are in a mood." She sat down opposite me. My father took the seat next to her. He nodded at Mara. "Good to see you." "Mara," he said, "let us make this quick. I have a tea time at 4, and Linda wants to stop at the nursery." He looked at me. He smiled. It was the smile he used when he was about to explain why he couldn't attend my choir concert. "Glad you are here. Alice," he said, "we can get this all sorted out. It is just a bit of family administrative housekeeping." He made it sound so small. Administrative housekeeping, like we were cleaning out a junk drawer, not discussing the fact that they had hidden a property portfolio while I was boiling water to wash my hair because the gas had been shut off. Mara cleared her throat. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "As trustee, Mr. Hughes, you requested this meeting to discuss the proposed sale of one of the trust assets?" "Right," my father said. He leaned back, resting his hands on his stomach. "We are looking to sell the duplex on 4th Street. The market is hot right now. And frankly, I am tired of dealing with college tenants. They are messy. We want to liquidate, simplify the portfolio, and maybe move the capital into something more passive. An index fund, maybe." He slid a document across the table toward me. He slid a matching one toward Ethan. "We just need the beneficiaries to sign off on the sale." He said, "Since you are contingent beneficiaries, the title company is being sticky about consent. Just a formality." I looked at the document. It was 3 pages long. It was titled, "Consent to Sale and Release of Claims." I put on my reading glasses. I took a pen from my pocket. I began to read. "Alice," my mother said, a note of impatience creeping into her voice. "It is standard. Your father read it. Mara read it. I kept reading. Paragraph 1 detailed the property address. Paragraph 2 detailed the sale price, $450,000. I stopped at paragraph 4. In consideration of the mutual promises contained herein, the undersigned beneficiary hereby waives any right to request, demand, or review a formal accounting of the trust prior to the date of this agreement, and releases the trustee from any liability regarding the management of said asset." I read it twice. The air in the room seemed to get thinner. I looked up. My father was watching me. His face was perfectly calm, but his eyes were hard. I cannot sign this, I said. My mother sighed. She dropped her head back, looking at the ceiling. Oh, for heaven's sake. Why not? My father asked. His voice was level. Because of paragraph 4. I said. I pointed to the clause with my pen. It says that if I sign this, I waive my right to see the accounting. It says I release you from liability. So? My father said. We are just selling a building. Alice, we are not launching a federal investigation. We need to move fast. The offer expires on Friday. If you hold this up with your process, we lose the deal. I am not holding it up. I said, I am reading what you gave me. You are asking me to agree that you managed this money correctly without showing me proof that you managed it correctly. We are your parents. My mother snapped. She leaned forward, her pastel cardigan bunching at her elbows. We are not strangers. We are not some corporation trying to cheat you. We are the people who raised you. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had told me that paying for college would make me soft. I looked at the woman who had renovated her kitchen while I was working a night shift at a logistics center. You are also the trustees, I said, and I am a beneficiary, and until I see where the rent money from this building went for the last 9 years, I am not waiving my right to ask. My mother's face tightened. The skin around her mouth went white. This is exactly why, she hissed. I waited. Why what? I asked. This is why we didn't pay for college, she said. Her voice shook with a sudden, venomous anger. Because you are impossible. You always question us. You always have to look at the fine print. You have no trust. Alice, you have no faith in this family. If we had given you that money, you would have audited us then, too. You would have held it over our heads. I felt a cold shock go through me. I would have held it over your heads? I repeated. You think I would have held your help over your heads? Yes, she cried. You are doing it now. We offer to simplify things, to make the family money grow. And you act like we are criminals. It is insulting. I looked at Ethan. He was staring at the table, his hands gripping his knees. He looked like he was going to be sick. Ethan, I said softly, did you read it? He jumped. He looked at me, his eyes wide and terrified. I don't know, he stammered. I mean, Dad said it was just to sell the building. Did you read the part about waiving the accounting? I asked. Ethan looked at our father. Grant was staring at him, a silent command in his posture. Ethan, just sign the damn paper, Grant said. Alice is having one of her episodes. You know how she gets? She likes to make things difficult because she thinks it makes her look smart. I am not making it difficult. I said, I am asking for transparency. Ethan, sign it. My mother said, do not be like your sister. Ethan picked up his pen. His hand was shaking so hard the tip tapped against the mahogany table. Click, click, click. I cannot, Ethan whispered. What? My father barked. I cannot sign it, Ethan said. He dropped the pen. It rolled across the table and fell onto the carpet with a soft thud. Why the hell not? My father demanded. Because she is right, Ethan yelled. The silence that followed was absolute. Ethan never yelled. Ethan was the peacemaker. Ethan was the one who smoothed things over. He looked at me. There were tears in his eyes. They paid for everything. Alice, he said. The words came out in a rush, like he was vomiting them up. What? I asked. My credit cards, he said. He was crying now. When I maxed them out junior year? $5,000. Dad paid it off. When I got laid off from that marketing job in Chicago, they paid my rent for 6 months. They sent me $1,200 a month so I wouldn't have to move home. Ethan, my mother shouted. Stop it. No, Ethan said. He stood up. I cannot do this anymore. I cannot sit here and watch you treat her like she is crazy for asking questions when you have been bailing me out for years. He looked at me. His face was wet with tears. I am sorry. Alice, he sobbed. I am so sorry. I didn't tell you because I was ashamed. I knew how hard you were working. I knew you were eating rice and working at that bakery. And I was taking their checks and I was terrified that if you knew, you would hate me. I sat there, frozen. I heard the numbers. $5,000, $1,200 a month. I thought about the night I cried in the stairwell because I didn't have $150 for a lab fee. I thought about the text from my mother saying she couldn't find the tax returns. They had been wiring money to Ethan the whole time. I looked at Ethan. He looked broken. He looked like a child waiting to be struck. I stood up. I walked around the table. My father stood up too, as if to block me. "Sit down." "Alice," he warned. I ignored him. I walked to Ethan. I put my hand on his arm. "It is okay," I said. He looked at me, stunned. "You are not mad?" "I am furious," I said, "but not at you." I looked at my parents. They were watching us with expressions of pure disgust. My mother looked at my hand on Ethan's arm like it was a contamination. "You made him afraid of me." I said to them, "You made him think that his sister, his only sister, was his enemy. Just so you could keep your secrets. He is weak." My father sneered. He sat back down, dismissing Ethan's distress with a wave of his hand. "He cannot handle pressure. That is why we helped him. He needed it. You didn't. You were strong." I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost blinded me. "I wasn't strong," I shouted. I slammed my hand on the table. The sound cracked like a gunshot in the quiet room. "I wasn't strong. I was drowning. I called you begging for help. I told you I was hungry. I told you I was failing classes because I was working 40 hours a week. And you sent me newspaper clippings about character." I took a breath. My chest was heaving. "You didn't help him because he was weak," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You helped him because you liked him better. And you didn't punish me because I was strong. You punished me because I wouldn't beg the way you wanted me to." My mother looked away. She picked at a loose thread on her cardigan. "You are being dramatic," she muttered. "This is exactly why we didn't want to discuss finances with you." Mara Vance spoke up. Her voice was cool, cutting through the emotional humidity of the room. "Mr. Hughes," she said, "regarding the consent form, since the beneficiaries are refusing to sign, we cannot proceed with the sale under these terms, and Ms. Hughes has raised a valid request for accounting." My father turned his glare on the lawyer. "Whose side are you on? Mara? You work for the trust. I am the grantor." "I work for the trust instrument," Mara corrected him, "and the instrument has duties to the beneficiaries." She opened a file folder. "And while we are discussing the administration," she said, "I have found something that requires clarification." She pulled out a document. It looked old. The edges were slightly yellowed. "This is the first amendment to the trust," Mara said, "the one that dissolved the education fund in 2013. I leaned forward. I noticed that the drafting firm is listed as Wexler and Pine. Mara said. She pointed to the footer of the page. "So?" my father said. "We used a few different firms back then. I checked the state bar registry." Mara said, "Wexler and Pine was not formed until 2014. The silence that followed was different from the silence after Ethan's confession. That had been emotional silence. This was legal silence. This was the silence of a trap snapping shut. "If this document was signed in 2013, Mara said, looking over her glasses, "it could not have been drafted by a firm that did not exist yet, which suggests that this document was created later and backdated." My father's face went a shade of red I had never seen before. It was a dark, bruised purple. "That is a clerical error," he said. His voice was tight. "We probably just re-signed a copy later because we lost the original. It happens. Re-signing a document with a retroactive date without disclosing it is fraud," Mara said. She didn't say it angrily. She said it like she was stating the weather. "And," she continued, "since there are questions about the validity of the amendment, I pulled the bank records for that period to see if the funds were actually moved in accordance with the amendment." She slid a spreadsheet across the table. It was a ledger. I looked at it. August 2012. Opening balance, $400,000. September 2012. Transfer out, $3,000. Description: ARU. Support. October 2012. Transfer out. $3,000. Description: A.R.U. Support. November 2012. Transfer out. $3,000. Description: A.R.U. Support. A.R.U. Alder Ridge University. I looked up. My heart was hammering against my ribs. You were paying the school? I asked. No, Mara said. Look at the recipient column. I looked. Recipient. Account ending in 4429. That is not the university's routing number. Mara said. I checked with the school's bursar. That is a private checking account. I looked at the dates. Every month, $3,000. For 4 years. That was $144,000. While I was taking out loans, while I was eating rice, while I was crying in the stairwell. Where did this money go? I asked. I held up the paper. My hand was shaking. It says ARU support. That is my school. That is my life. Where did it go? My mother stood up. She gathered her purse. It was administrative, she said. Her voice was high and brittle. It was for overhead. Related to your education. What overhead? I screamed. I stood up too. I paid my own tuition. I paid my own rent. I paid for my own books. What overhead did you have? Enough, my father shouted. He slammed his hand on the table again. This meeting is over, he said. He pointed a finger at me. You are ungrateful. You are destroying this family. We try to simplify things. We try to protect the assets. And you come in here with your lawyer and your accusations. He looked at Mara. We are done here. I will be finding new counsel. He grabbed my mother's arm. Come on. Linda, Ethan, let us go. Ethan didn't move. He was still sitting there, staring at the ledger. I said, let us go, my father roared. Ethan stood up slowly. He looked at me. He looked like a ghost. I will call you. Alice, he whispered. Do not call her, my father said. He grabbed Ethan's shoulder and shoved him toward the door. He stopped at the door and looked back at me. If you keep digging, Alice, he said, his voice low and shaking with rage, you will find nothing but dirt, and you will be the one buried in it. They walked out. I stood in the silence of the conference room. I looked at the ledger, ARU, support. It wasn't just theft. It was mockery. They had labeled the theft with the name of the thing they were stealing from me. They had used my struggle as a line-item description for their own enrichment. I drove home in a daze. I didn't remember the highway. I didn't remember the exit. I got to my apartment and sat on the floor. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep the next night. It wasn't the fear of the conflict that kept me awake. I wasn't afraid of Grant Hughes anymore. I was past fear. It was the grief. It was a heavy, suffocating grief that pressed down on my chest. It was the realization that my parents hadn't just ignored me. They had consumed me. They had looked at my life, my potential, my education, my future, and they had seen a resource to be harvested. They had watched me struggle. They had visited my apartment and seen the lack of furniture. My mother had commented on my weight loss. My father had sent me articles about grit. And all the while, every single month, they went to the bank and transferred $3,000 out of a fund meant for me, and they spent it on themselves. They had eaten my future. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction of the last 9 years. Every time I had felt guilty for not visiting, every time I had felt proud of my independence, it was all a lie. My independence wasn't a virtue. It was a profit margin for them. 2 days later, Jonah came over. I hadn't showered. I was wearing the same sweatpants I had worn to the meeting. I was sitting on my couch, surrounded by papers, the trust summary, the ledger, my own loan statements. I was trying to match the dates. Jonah took one look at me and set his bag down. Okay, he said. He walked into the kitchen. I heard him running water. I heard the kettle. He came back with tea. He sat down next to me. Alice, he said gently, you have to sleep. I cannot. I said, I was pointing at the papers. Look, October 2014. I had a dental emergency. I needed a root canal. It cost $1,200. I didn't have it. I let the tooth rot for 3 months until it broke. I picked up the ledger, October 2014. Transfer out. $3,000. A.R.U. Support. I looked at Jonah. They stole my tooth. Jonah. They stole my teeth. Jonah pulled me into him. He held me while I shook. Alice, he said, move in with me. I froze. What? Move in with me, he said. My lease is up in 2 months. You are paying $1,200 a month for this place. If we move in together, we split the rent. You save $600 a month. You can use it to pay legal fees. You can use it to breathe. I pulled away. I looked at him. He looked so kind. He looked so safe. He was offering me a lifeline, and I was terrified. I looked at the ledger, RU support. Dependence was a trap. Dependence was how they got you. If I moved in with him, I would need him. If I needed him, he would have power over me. And if he had power over me, he could hurt me. I cannot. I whispered. Why? Jonah asked. Alice, I love you. I want to help you. I know. I said. I stood up. I walked to the window. I looked out at the parking lot. I know you want to help, I said, but right now, help feels like a weapon. I cannot owe you. Jonah, I cannot owe anyone anything, not ever again. But you are drowning, he said. No, I said. I turned back to him. I was drowning. Now? Now I am swimming. I am swimming toward the boat. Jonah, and I am going to sink it. I looked at the pile of papers. I am not going to save money by moving in with you. I said, I'm going to get my money back. I'm going to get every single cent. Jonah looked at me. He looked sad, but he nodded. Okay, he said. Then we fight. He picked up a highlighter. Where do we start? We start with the account. I said, account ending in 4429. We find out who owns it, and I knew exactly who to ask. I picked up my phone. I dialed Ethan. He answered on the first ring. Alice? He whispered. Ethan, I said, I need you to go to the house. I need you to find a bank statement. I cannot. He said, Dad is watching me like a hawk. Ethan, I said, they used your name too. What? I saw the rest of the ledger. I lied. I hadn't seen it yet. But I knew. I knew them. There are transfers labeled Ethan support too. Silence. Go to the house. Ethan, I said. Find the statement for account 4429. Okay, he said. His voice was trembling. I will try. I hung up. I looked at Jonah. He was looking at me with a mixture of awe and fear. You lied to him, Jonah said. I picked up the highlighter. I am independent. Jonah. I said, I do what I have to do. Ethan called me back 20 minutes later. He was hyperventilating in his car, parked down the street from our parents' house. I found it. He wheezed. I found a statement in the shredder pile in the home office. Dad hadn't emptied the bin yet. Send me the picture, I said. My hand was gripping the phone so hard my fingers ached. My phone buzzed a moment later. It was a grainy photo of a Chase bank statement. Wrinkled and torn at the corner, the account holder was listed at the top. Alder Ridge Consulting, LLC. I stared at the name. Alder Ridge, A-R-U. It was not the university. It was a shell company. I went to the Secretary of State's website. I searched for the business entity. There it was. Alder Ridge Consulting, LLC. Registered agent. Grant Hughes. Date of formation. September 2013. That was the fall of my sophomore year. That was the semester I started working the dawn shift at the bakery. That was the semester I stopped buying textbooks and started sharing with classmates to save money. My father had created a company with the same initials as my university, opened a bank account, and then funneled the trust money, my tuition money, into it, labeling the transfers ARU, support so that anyone glancing at the ledger would assume it was going to the school. It was not just theft. It was mimicry. It was a con. I felt a wave of nausea so violent I had to lean over the sink. I dry heaved, spitting bile into the drain. He had looked me in the eye. He had sat across from me at Christmas dinners. He had lectured me about fiscal responsibility while he was laundering my education fund through a dummy corporation. I washed my face with cold water. I dried it with a rough towel. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked pale, haggard. My eyes rimmed with red. I did not care how I looked. I grabbed my keys. I drove to their house. I did not call first. I did not ask for permission. It was a Tuesday evening. They would be eating dinner. My mother made meatloaf on Tuesdays. It was a routine as immutable as gravity. I pulled into the driveway. The house looked warm and inviting, the windows glowing with golden light. The new patio furniture on the front porch looked pristine. I walked through the front door. It was unlocked. I walked into the dining room. They were there. Grant and Linda Hughes, sitting at the head and foot of the mahogany table, eating meatloaf and green beans. They looked up. My mother dropped her fork. It clattered against the china. "Alice?" she said. I did not say hello. I threw the printout of the business registration onto the table. It landed in the center, next to the salt shaker, Alder Ridge Consulting. I said, My father stopped chewing. He looked at the paper. He did not look surprised. He looked annoyed, like I had interrupted a television show he was watching. "You broke into our house." "Alice?" he asked calmly. "I know what ARU stands for." I said, "It does not stand for the university. It stands for your side business, the one you registered the same month you told me you couldn't co-sign my loan because your liquidity was tied up." I walked closer to the table. I gripped the back of Ethan's empty chair. "You were transferring $3,000 a month into your own pocket." I said, "And you labeled it support, so it would look like you were paying my tuition." My mother looked at my father. Her face was gray. "Grant," she whispered. My father wiped his mouth with a linen napkin. He set it down on the table. "It was not my pocket." "Alice," he said, "it was a business. It was a shell." I shouted, "It was a consulting firm." He shouted back. He stood up. He was taller than me, broader. He used his size to intimidate, looming over the table. "I made a bad investment in 2012. He said, "A strip mall development in Arizona. It went belly up. I was leveraged to the hilt. We were going to lose this house. We were going to lose the cars. We were going to lose everything." "So you stole my college fund?" I asked. "I borrowed against the trust to stabilize the family," he roared. "I started the consulting firm to handle some freelance crisis management work to pay the mortgage. I needed capital to get it off the ground. I used the education fund because it was the only liquid cash we had." "And you didn't tell me?" I asked. My voice shook. "You let me work in a bakery at 4 a.m? You let me eat rice? You let me cry to you about money and you said nothing? I protected you," he said. He looked at me with genuine indignation. "If I had told you we were broke, you would have panicked. You would have worried. By keeping you in the dark. I saved you from the stress of our financial ruin. I saved this family. Alice, I saved this house. You sacrificed me to save the house." I said, "It was a necessary sacrifice." He said it like it was a fact of nature. "Like rain. Like winter. You were young." He continued, "You could work. You had energy. We were in our 50s. We couldn't start over. You could, and look at you. You did. You graduated. You have a career. It worked out." "It worked out?" I whispered. I looked at my mother. She was crying silently, tears tracking through her foundation. "Mom," I said, "did you know?" She nodded. She didn't look at me. She looked at her hands. "We didn't want you to be soft," she said. The words hung in the air. "What?" I asked. "We were afraid," she said. Her voice was a high, thin tremble. "Your cousin Sarah. My sister paid for everything for her, and she turned out so helpless. She cannot hold a job. She is 35, and she still asks for rent money. We didn't want that for you. We saw how capable you were. Even when you were little, you were always so fierce. So you broke me?" I asked, to make sure I wouldn't be soft. "We didn't break you," my father snapped. "We forged you." "And Ethan?" I asked. "Why did Ethan get a pass? Why did Ethan get his rent paid?" Why did Ethan get the truth? My mother looked up. Her eyes were wet and terrified. Ethan needs us, she said. Ethan is different. He gets overwhelmed. He has anxiety. If we treated him the way we treated you, he would have crumbled. He needed guidance. He needed a safety net. You didn't. You were the strong one. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat. It was a hysterical, jagged thing. I was the strong one because I had to be. I said, I was the strong one because you left me no choice. You looked at your children and you decided one was a pet to be pampered and one was a workhorse to be used. That is not fair, my father said. Fair? I looked at him. I looked at the man who had stolen $144,000 from me and called it character building. You are right, Dad, I said. It is not fair. It is theft, and I'm going to prove it. I turned to leave. If you walk out that door, my father said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. You are declaring war on this family, and you have no idea what I am capable of when I am threatened. I looked back at him. I know exactly what you are capable of. I said, you are capable of watching your daughter starve to save your patio furniture. I walked out. I drove straight to Mara Vance's office the next morning. I didn't have an appointment, but the receptionist let me in immediately. I told her everything. I told her about Alder Ridge Consulting. I told her about the confession. Mara listened, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Her face was grim. The admission helps, she said, but without a recording, it is hearsay. He will deny he ever said it. He will say he was talking about legitimate business loans, but the name, I said, the ARU label, that is fraud. It is deceptive. Mara agreed, but he will argue it was an acronym for his company. He will argue the trust allowed for investment in family businesses. We need the full accounting. We need to see if the money was ever paid back. It wasn't. I said, I know it wasn't. We need to file a formal petition for accounting and removal of trustee. Mara said, we will allege breach of fiduciary duty and self-dealing. It is aggressive. It will become public record. Do it, I said. Mara hesitated. Alice, she said, when we file this, the clock starts. He will be served. He will have to hire a litigator. This is not a dispute anymore. It is a lawsuit. I understand. I said, file it. I signed the retainer agreement. I wrote a check for $5,000, my entire savings, the money I had scraped together since paying off the private loan. I went back to work. I sat at my desk at Northbridge Claims and tried to focus on insurance codes. I felt hollowed out. I felt like I was made of glass and one wrong move would shatter me. 2 days later, I got a text message from my father. It was short. You are making a mistake. If you do not withdraw the petition by Friday, I will be forced to tell people the truth about you. I stared at the screen. The truth about me? What truth? That I worked hard? That I paid my bills? That I was boring? I didn't reply. I took a screenshot and sent it to Mara. The next day, Thursday, I was called into the office of the Director of Human Resources at Northbridge. Alice, come in, the director said. She did not smile. She gestured to a chair. Sitting next to her was the company's internal compliance officer. My stomach dropped. Alice, we have received an anonymous complaint regarding your handling of the Kleinsman accounts. The director said, the Kleinsman accounts were high-value files I had been managing for 6 months. The complaint alleges that you have been suppressing denial letters to artificially inflate your resolution metrics, the compliance officer said, and that there are irregularities in the billing codes you authorized. What? I said. That is insane. I follow protocol to the letter. You can check my logs. We are checking them, the director said. But given the severity of the allegations, potential fraud and compliance violations, we have to place you on administrative leave pending the investigation. Leave? I asked. My voice rose. You are suspending me? Based on an anonymous tip? It is standard procedure. Alice, she said, hand over your badge and your laptop. We will be in touch. I stood up. I felt dizzy. Who sent the complaint? I asked. We cannot disclose that. She said, I knew. I knew instantly. My father worked in consulting. He knew how corporate compliance worked. He knew the buzzwords that triggered an immediate freeze: fraud, irregularities, suppression. He didn't need proof. He just needed to throw enough sand in the gears to stop the machine. He was cutting off my income. He was showing me that my independence, the job I was so proud of, was fragile. He could snap it like a twig. I handed over my badge. I walked out of the building carrying my personal items in a cardboard box. It was a cliché from a movie, but it felt like a funeral. I drove to Jonah's apartment. I didn't go to mine. I couldn't be alone. Jonah was at work, but I had a key now. I let myself in. I sat on his couch and stared at the wall. When he came home at 5, he found me sitting in the dark. "Alice," he said. "He did it." I said. My voice was flat. "He got me suspended." Jonah dropped his bag and ran to me. He knelt in front of the couch. "What happened?" I told him. I told him about the text. I told him about the HR meeting. Jonah's face hardened. He stood up and began pacing the room. "That is retaliation," he said. "That is harassment. We can prove it." "How?" I asked. "It was anonymous. We tracked the timing," Jonah said. He pulled out his laptop. He sat down next to me. "Show me the text he sent you." I showed him. "Okay," Jonah said. "Tuesday. You confront him. Wednesday. He threatens you. Thursday. You get suspended. The timeline is undeniable. We build a timeline." He started typing. "We need everything." "Alice," he said. "Every email he ever sent you, every text, every time he mentioned his connections in the industry, we are going to build a profile of a man who uses reputation as a weapon." I watched him work. He was fierce. He was angry on my behalf. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was gratitude, but it was mixed with nausea. I was doing exactly what I swore I wouldn't do. I was leaning on him. I was unemployed. I was a liability. "Jonah," I said, "I cannot pay my rent if I lose this job." "We will figure it out," he said without looking up. "No," I said, "I cannot let you pay for me. That is how it starts." "Alice, stop," he said. He turned to me. "This is not a transaction. We are a team. He is trying to isolate you. He wants you to feel alone so you will fold. Do not let him win." I looked at him. "He wants you to feel alone." Jonah was right. My father's strategy was isolation. He wanted to strip away my resources until I had to come crawling back to the family trust, begging for forgiveness and a stipend. "I am not folding." I said. We spent the next 3 days building the file. We printed emails where my father bragged about pulling strings for a friend's son. We found a LinkedIn post where he talked about aggressive leverage in business negotiations. It was circumstantial, but it painted a picture. Then, on Sunday night, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Ethan. Subject: "Found this in the attic. Do not tell Dad." Attached was a scan of a handwritten letter. I opened it. The handwriting was shaky, old-fashioned script. I recognized it immediately. It was my grandfather's, Harold Hughes. He had died the year before I started college. I read the date. June 2011. A year before he died. "My dearest Grant, I am writing this to ensure my wishes are clear regarding the disposition of the properties on 4th Street and the commercial strip. I know you and Linda have had your struggles with cash flow, and I am happy to leave these assets to the trust to support the family. But I want to be explicit about Alice. I have watched her these last few years. She is a serious girl. She works harder than anyone in that house, including you. I worry that you and Linda favor Ethan because he demands more attention. While Alice suffers in silence, the income from the 4th Street duplex is to be directed to the education fund for Alice first. She has the grades for a top-tier school, and I will not have her punished for your financial missteps. Ensure she is taken care of. She is the best of us. Love, Dad." I read the letter 3 times. The education fund was meant for her first. I felt the words hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just a generic family pot. My grandfather had seen it. He had seen the dynamic. He had seen me, And he had explicitly instructed them to use that money for me. They hadn't just stolen from the trust. They had defied a dying man's wish to cheat me. And the line, "She is the best of us." I started to cry. I cried for the 18-year-old girl who thought she wasn't good enough. I cried for the girl who thought she had to earn her place in the world by suffering. My grandfather had loved me. He had tried to protect me. And they had buried his letter in a box in the attic and rewritten history to make themselves the heroes. Jonah came into the room. He saw my face. He saw the letter on the screen. He read it over my shoulder. He let out a low, angry breath. "This is it," he said. "This proves intent. They knew. They knew exactly what the money was for." I wiped my face. I stood up. "I am done hiding," I said. I looked at the pile of evidence, the bank statements, the text messages, the letter. I called Mara Vance. It was Sunday night, but I didn't care. "Mara," I said when she answered, "I have a letter from the original grantor. It outlines specific intent for the assets, and it proves my father lied about the purpose of the fund. Send it to me." Mara said, her voice was sharp, alert. "I am sending it," I said. "And Mara?" "Yes." "Set up a mediation." I said, "I don't want to wait for court. I want them in a room. I want them to look at this letter while I'm sitting there." "Alice, are you sure?" Mara asked. "Mediation is voluntary. They might walk out. They won't walk out." I said, "Why not?" "Because I am going to tell them that if they don't settle this now, I am going to send this letter to every client Alder Ridge Consulting has. I am going to send it to the ethics board of his industry. I am going to burn his reputation to the ground." "Alice," Mara warned, "be careful. That sounds like blackmail." "It is not blackmail," I said. "It is the truth. And like he said, he should be afraid of what I'm capable of." I hung up. I looked at Jonah. "I am ready," I said. I wasn't fighting for the money anymore. The money was just numbers on a screen. I was fighting for the reality of my life. I was fighting to reclaim the truth that my struggle wasn't a virtue, it was a crime, and I was going to make them confess. The package arrived on a Thursday. It was a thick, heavy envelope delivered by a courier who required a signature. I signed for it with a hand that felt remarkably steady. Considering I knew I was holding the autopsy report of my relationship with my parents, it was the formal trust accounting. I took it to the kitchen table. Jonah was at work. I was alone. I wanted to be alone. I needed to look the beast in the eye without anyone holding my hand. I opened the binder. It was organized with professional tabs, the paper crisp and white. Vance and Associates had done their job, but the data they had been given was a Swiss cheese of omissions. I turned to the section labeled Disbursements, 2012 to 2016. It was a joke. There were entire months missing. November of 2013 simply did not exist. May of 2014 was summarized with a single line item: administrative expenses, $4,000, and then there was the amendment. Mara had warned me about it, but seeing it was different, it was a document dated September 10th, 2012. It was titled Second Amendment to the Hughes Family Living Trust. Paragraph 3 read, "The grantors hereby revoke any specific allocations regarding educational subtrusts, placing all assets under the sole discretion of the trustees for the general welfare of the family unit." The signature at the bottom, my father's, was done in a blue ballpoint pen, but the date was typed. I looked closer. I held the paper up to the light. The font for the date was slightly different from the body text. It was a serif font, while the rest was sans serif. It was a clumsy, desperate forgery of time. They had created this document recently, probably the week after I met Mara, and backdated it to justify the theft. They were trying to erase the education fund my grandfather had mandated. They were rewriting history to make their cruelty legal. I closed the binder. I felt a cold, hard stone settle in my stomach. It was the final death of the hope I hadn't realized I was still holding. The hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a misunderstanding. There was no misunderstanding. There was only the math of control. The mediation was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I woke up at 5 in the morning. I showered and dressed in my best suit, a charcoal gray blazer I had bought for my interview at Northbridge. I pulled my hair back into a tight, severe bun. I put on makeup, but not too much. I wanted to look professional. I wanted to look like the financial analyst I was, not the daughter they remembered. Jonah was awake, watching me from the bed. "Do you want me to come?" he asked. "No," I said. I was putting my documents into a leather satchel. "This is between me and them. If you are there, they will focus on you. They will judge your shoes or your job. I need them to look at me." He nodded. He understood. "Call me when you get out." "I will," I said. I drove to the mediation center. It was a neutral site, a suite of offices downtown that smelled of industrial carpet cleaner and stale coffee. Mara met me in the lobby. She looked tired. I got the accounting. I said, "I know." She said, "It is a mess. I have already flagged 18 separate inconsistencies. And the backdated amendment? It is laughable. A forensic document examiner would tear it apart in 10 minutes. "Good," I said. "Alice," Mara said, stopping me before we entered the conference room, "I need you to prepare yourself. They are bringing a new lawyer, a man named Silas Thorne. He is aggressive. He is a corporate litigator. He is not here to facilitate a family reconciliation. He is here to crush a nuisance. I am not a nuisance." I said, "I am the plaintiff." Mara looked at me. She adjusted her glasses. "Keep that energy," she said. "Do not let them bait you. If you get angry, you look unstable. If you cry, you look weak. You have to be ice. I am ice," I said. We walked in. The room was long and narrow. My parents were already seated on the left side. Ethan was sitting next to them, looking like a prisoner of war. My father was wearing a navy suit. He looked robust, confident. He did not look like a man who had stolen his daughter's future. He looked like a man who was about to close a deal. My mother was next to him, wearing a pearl necklace and a look of tragic martyrdom. And then there was Silas Thorne. He was a thin man with silver hair and a smile that did not reach his eyes. He had a stack of files in front of him that dwarfed mine. "Ms. Hughes," Thorne said, not standing up. He gestured to the empty chairs opposite them. "Please, let us get started." I sat down. I placed my satchel on the table. I did not unzip it. I folded my hands on top of it. I did not look at my parents. I looked at the mediator, a retired judge named Mr. Henderson, who sat at the head of the table. "Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "We are here to resolve the dispute regarding the administration of the Hughes Family Living Trust," he said. "The goal is to avoid litigation. Mr. Thorne, you may begin." Thorne leaned forward. He clasped his hands. "Mr. Henderson," he began, his voice smooth and baritone. "My clients, Grant and Linda Hughes, are loving parents who have found themselves in the unfortunate position of being targeted by an estranged daughter." I kept my face blank. Estranged, targeted. Alice has clearly had a difficult time launching into adulthood. Thorne continued. "She has struggled with debt. She has struggled with employment. We understand that this financial pressure can lead to resentment. It can lead to a revisionist history where one feels entitled to resources that were never promised." I dug my fingernails into my palms under the table. "However," Thorne said, opening a folder, "my clients wish to be generous. They wish to help Alice move past this fixation so she can focus on her own life. To that end, we have prepared a settlement offer." He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Mara picked it up. She read it. Her eyebrows went up. She slid it to me. I looked at the number. $75,000. It was a lot of money. It was enough to pay off my remaining federal student loans. It was enough to pay off my car. It was enough to put a down payment on a small condo. It was the price of my life. Grant and Linda are willing to pay a lump sum of $75,000 to Alice Hughes. Thorne said, "This is a goodwill gesture. It is not an admission of wrongdoing. It is simply a way to help a family member in need." I looked at the number again. "And the conditions?" Mara asked. Thorne smiled. Standard, he said. Alice will sign a full release of claims. She will withdraw her petition for accounting. She will acknowledge that the trust was administered correctly, and she will sign a non-disclosure agreement. She will never discuss the trust, the family finances, or the contents of this settlement with any third party, not a therapist, not a spouse, not the press. I looked up. I looked at my father. He was watching me with a look of benevolent expectation. He thought he had won. He thought he had found my price. He thought that $75,000 could buy the 9 years I had spent thinking I was unworthy of love. He thought I was still the girl who couldn't afford the lab fee. I looked at the paper. I looked at the check attached to it. It is a generous offer. Thorne said, given that your case is built on a decade-old letter and hearsay, this is more than you would get in court after legal fees. I picked up the paper. I felt the texture of it. It was high-quality bond paper. I looked at my mother. She offered me a tentative, wobbly smile. Take it, Alice, she mouthed. I looked at Ethan. He was staring at the table, his face pale. I looked at Mara. She gave me a tiny nod. It was a good deal, legally speaking. It closed the book. It gave me freedom. But it wasn't freedom. It was a purchase. If I took this money, I was agreeing to their version of the story. I was agreeing that I was a charity case. I was agreeing that they were the benevolent saviors. I was agreeing to sell my voice for the rest of my life. I put the paper down. No, I said. The room went silent. Excuse me? Thorne said. His smile faltered. No, I repeated. I pushed the paper back across the table. Alice, my father said, his voice warning, do not be an idiot. This is a lifeline. This clears your debt. This is what you wanted. No, I said. I looked him in the eye. This is not what I wanted. I didn't come here for a check. Dad, I came here for the truth. I opened my satchel. I pulled out the binder. I pulled out the ledger with the ARU support transfers. I pulled out the registration for Alder Ridge Consulting. I pulled out the grandfather's letter. I laid them out on the table like tarot cards. You stole $144,000 from a fund specifically designated for me. I said, you used my university's initials to hide it. You watched me work 3 jobs. You watched me get suspended from work because you sabotaged me. And now you want to give me $75,000 to say thank you? I shook my head. I have one question. I said, just one. I looked at my mother. Why was independence only for me? My mother blinked. What? Why? I asked. My voice was steady, but it felt like it was coming from the center of the earth. Why was I the one who had to suffer? Why was Ethan allowed to be weak? Why was I the one who had to be independent? My mother looked at my father. She looked trapped. Alice, we told you, she stammered. We wanted you to be strong. Stop lying, I said. It wasn't a scream. It was a command. Stop telling me it was for my own good. You don't steal $100,000 from your daughter for her own good. You don't verify her poverty for her own good. Why did you do it? Thorne interrupted. Ms. Hughes, this line of questioning is unproductive. The offer is on the table. If you reject it, I reject it. I said, I reject your money. I reject your NDA. I reject your version of reality. I turned back to my parents. Tell me why, I said, or I walk out of here and I release all of this. I send grandfather's letter to every partner at your firm. Dad, I send the ledger to the IRS. I burn it all down. My father's face turned purple. You wouldn't dare. Try me. I said, I have nothing to lose. I am independent. Remember? Suddenly, a chair scraped against the floor. It was Ethan. He stood up. He held a piece of paper in his hand. It was crumpled. I found another one, he said. We all looked at him. Ethan, sit down. My father snapped. No, Ethan said. His voice was shaking. But he didn't sit. I found another letter. From Grandpa. In the safe. He threw the paper on the table. It was dated 2 months before my grandfather died. I read the handwriting upside down. Grant, you must stop favoring the boy. You are crippling him with your anxiety, and you are punishing Alice for your own insecurities. She is the one who will leave if you are not careful. She is the one with the wings." Ethan looked at me. There were tears running down his face. "They told me it was fair," he said. He looked at our parents. "You told me Alice didn't need help. You told me she liked working. You told me she was cold." He wiped his nose. "She wasn't cold," he said. "She was hungry." "Ethan, stop this," my mother cried. "You don't understand." "I understand," Ethan yelled. He slammed his hand on the table. It was a weak slam, but it was the loudest noise he had ever made. "I understand that you used me to make yourself feel needed, and you used her to make yourself feel rich." He looked at me. "I cannot unsee it. Alice," he said, "I cannot unsee the ledger. I cannot unsee the fact that my rent money came from your tuition." He looked at our father. "I am done. Dad, I am not signing the consent form. I am not taking another dime." My father looked at Ethan like he was a stranger. "You are cutting yourself off? You? You cannot survive a week without us." "Maybe not," Ethan said, "but I would rather starve than be part of this." The room was vibrating with the energy of the collapse. The perfect Hughes family image was shattering on the carpet. I looked at my mother. She was weeping. Not the polite, martyr tears she usually cried. These were ugly, gasping sobs. "Mom," I said. She looked up. Her mascara was running. "Why?" I asked again. She took a breath. It was a ragged, shuddering sound. "Because you were going to leave," she whispered. I froze. "What? You were always going to leave," she said. She looked at me with a terrifying mixture of love and resentment. "You were so smart. You were so driven. Even when you were 10 years old, you were planning your escape. You wanted to go to the city. You wanted big things." She wiped her face. "If we gave you the money," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "you would have just gone. You would have graduated, gotten a big job, and you never would have looked back. You wouldn't have needed us." She looked at my father, then back at me. "We thought if it was hard, if you had to struggle, you would have to come back. You would have to ask for help. We thought the debt would be a tether. We thought if you owed us, or if you needed us to co-sign, or if you needed a place to stay, you would stay connected." I stared at her. I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't even about the investment. It was about the leash. They had crippled me financially to keep me in the nest. They had engineered my poverty to manufacture my dependence. They wanted me to fail, just enough that I would have to come home and be their child forever. "And Ethan?" I asked. She looked at Ethan. "Ethan needs us," she said. "We knew he would never leave. He is softer. We didn't have to break him to keep him, but you—" She looked at me like I was a wild animal they had tried to domesticate with starvation. "You were always flight risk." "Alice," I sat there. I processed the horror of it. They loved me, in their sick, twisted, narcissistic way. They loved me. They loved me so much they were willing to destroy my future to keep me within driving distance. They were willing to watch me eat rice so that I would eventually have to come home for a Sunday roast. I stood up. I picked up my binder. I picked up the grandfather's letter. I looked at my mother. It didn't tether me. "Mom," I said. She looked up. "It didn't make me need you," I said. "It taught me that you were willing to watch me suffer to feel secure." I looked at my father. "It taught me that love, for you, is a hostage situation." My father stood up. His face was red, the veins in his neck bulging. "You ungrateful little bitch," he hissed. "Mr. Hughes," Mara shouted. My father ignored her. He leaned over the table. "I made you," he shouted. "I put a roof over your head. I fed you. And this is how you repay us? By dragging us into a legal battle? By turning your brother against us?" He pointed a shaking finger at me. "If you walk out of here without signing that paper," he said, "I will make sure you never work in finance again. I know people. Alice, I know the board at Northbridge. I know the recruiters. I will paint you as a fraud. I will paint you as a thief. I will ruin you." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had terrified me for 30 years. I looked at the man whose approval I had chased with high grades and perfectly balanced spreadsheets, and I realized he was small. He was just a small, scared man with a checkbook and a god complex. You already tried that. Dad, I said, you already got me suspended. And you know what? I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. I am still standing. I turned to Mara. We are done here. I said, file the petition. Prepare the lawsuit. I want a forensic accounting going back to 2012. I want every penny. And I want interest. Mr. Thorne, Mara said, standing up and gathering her files. Your client just threatened a witness on the record in front of a mediator. This session is terminated. My father was still shouting as we walked out. My mother was sobbing. Thorne was trying to shut my father up. I walked out of the conference room. I walked down the hallway. I pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped out into the sunlight. The air smelled like car exhaust and freedom. I stood on the sidewalk, my hands shaking. The adrenaline was crashing. I felt lightheaded. The door opened behind me. Alice. It was Ethan. He ran out. He looked disheveled. His tie was crooked. He stopped in front of me. He was breathing hard. Are you okay? He asked. I don't know. I said, I honestly didn't. I am sorry. Ethan said, I know that doesn't fix it, but I am sorry. I looked at him. I saw the brother I had resented for 9 years. I saw the boy who got the help. But I also saw the boy who had just blown up his own safety net to stand next to me. You are going to be cut off. You know, I said, they will stop the rent. They will stop the allowance. I know, he said. He looked terrified, but he also looked relieved. I guess I will have to get a job. Maybe at a bakery. I smiled. A real smile this time. Do not work at a bakery, I said. It ruins your back. Try a library. He laughed. It was a watery, shaky sound. Alice, he said, do not disappear. Please, I know you don't need us. I know you are independent. But do not disappear. I looked at him. I thought about my mother's words. You were always going to leave. I reached out and took his hand. I am not disappearing. Ethan, I said, I am just finally leaving the house. A car pulled up to the curb. It was Jonah's beat-up sedan. He rolled down the window. He looked at me, then at Ethan, then at the building. How did it go? He asked. I looked at the binder in my hand. I looked at the unsigned settlement offer I had shoved into my pocket, the confidentiality agreement that I had refused to sign. It went nuclear. I said. Jonah nodded. He unlocked the passenger door. What do you want to do? He asked. I looked at the confidentiality papers. I took them out of my pocket. I ripped them in half, then in quarters. I walked over to the trash can on the corner and dropped them in. I want to get a burger, I said, a really expensive one. And then I want to sue them for everything they have. Jonah grinned. Get in, he said. I got in the car. Ethan waved. I waved back. As we drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw the building where my parents were sitting with their expensive lawyer, trying to figure out how to spin this, how to control the narrative, how to fix the unfixable. They couldn't fix it. I had lost my parents. I had lost the illusion of a happy childhood. I had lost the years I spent eating rice and hating myself. But as I watched the building shrink in the distance, I realized what I had found. I wasn't independent because they forced me to be. I wasn't independent because I was cold or hard or unloving. I was independent because I had survived them. And for the first time in my life, the word didn't feel like a sentence. It felt like a weapon. And I was finally holding the handle. Thank you so much for listening to Alice's story. This was a heavy one, but I think it's important to talk about how financial abuse can hide behind the mask of good parenting. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Where are you listening from? Have you ever dealt with family members who used money as a way to control you? Let's talk about it, in English. Of course, so we can all share our experiences. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more dramas about justice, betrayal, and reclaiming your life, please hit that subscribe button for revenge stories. It really helps the channel grow. Until next time, stay strong. And remember, true independence is the one thing they can't take away from you.